thriving 21st century community. I'm Sarah Val, and today we've got two legendary guests who probably need no introduction. Let's give them one anyway. First, the civil rights leader whose words and actions continue to inspire movements around the world, Dr. Martin Luther King. It is an absolute pleasure to have you.
The honor is mine, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me to share in this conversation today.
Joining us as well, the brilliant playwright, the author of The Crucible, Arthur Miller. Author, I've always admired the way you've woven history and allegory together with human drama. As I've said before, American history is a quagmire, and the more one knows, the craggier the mire gets.
Well, thank you, Sarah. All that's in the past isn't dead. It's not in the past, so I think we have a lot to dig into.
Absolutely. Today, we're talking about what makes a successful community in the 21st century. Dr. King, I'd love to start with you. What are the key characteristics that define a productive, thriving community in today's world?
Well, Sarah, I think at my very heart, any thriving community is justice, not as a legal construct, but as a lived experience. We must understand that the health of a community depends on how we treat the most vulnerable among us. As I said in the past, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. A community cannot thrive if its people are denied equality, whether it's racial equality, economic justice, or access to opportunity. When everyone has a fair shot, that's when we start to see the beauty of a beloved community emerge.
I agree, Dr. King, that justice is vital, but I argue that the real challenge is how we handle fear and intolerance in the communities. In my book, the Salem witch trials became a nightmare precisely because people were afraid of the unknown, of each other, and losing the grip on power. I see a similar dynamic today because people speak about justice, but oftentimes actually are still very motivated by fear. And as John Proctor says, we always were in Salem, but now that little crazy children are jangling the keys of the kingdom and common vintage writes the law. Fear warps judgment, and in times of crisis, it becomes all too easy for communities, even well-meaning ones, to turn on each other. Without actively resisting that fear, we risk repeating the same tragic mistakes, letting vengeance and paranoia take the place of justice.
That's true, Arthur. Fear can be deeply destructive, but I would argue that fear, when faced with love and nonviolence, can be transformed. I've seen in the civil rights movement. Yes, fear was present, but by engaging in nonviolent resistance and moral dialogue, we showed that fear didn't have to lead to violence or oppression. The path forward for today's communities isn't to give fear more power, it's to meet it with understanding and compassion.
I hear you, but I wonder if that's always possible. Nonviolence works when people are open to dialogue. In Salem, or even during McCarthy's, we saw that fear could be weaponized to shut down dialogue altogether. It's not just fear, it's how people easily exploit and manipulate it. There are always opportunities ready to exploit fear and power. In that government, communists can spiral into chaos just like Salem did, and also America in the 1980s. My concern is that sometimes love and dialogue may not be enough when people are intent on exploiting the vision for their own gain.
That's an interesting point, Arthur. It makes me think about how today's communities deal with division. We're in an age where people seem more polarized than ever. Like I've said before, the only thing more dangerous than an idea is a belief. And by dangerous, I don't mean thought-provoking. I mean it might get people killed. Dr. King, how do we engage in dialogue with one side, or sometimes both, who seem so entrenched in their positions?
Well, it's not easy, Sarah, but I believe that hope and faith in our shared humanity are crucial. The work I did and what many continue to do requires persistence. We don't stop engaging in dialogue because it's difficult. We push through, trusting that truth and justice are on our side. But I would also emphasize that dialogue isn't passive. It's action, non-violent action that demands accountability. Sometimes that means disrupting the status quo. Love doesn't always mean avoiding confrontation. It means confronting injustice in a way that seeks to heal and not destroy.
I respect that deeply, but I think there are moments when confrontation is unavoidable and the risks are enormous. In Salem, people like John Proctor stood up for the truth, but it cost them their lives. His courage in refusing to confess to a lie was admirable, but look at what it took. He had to reject his society entirely. Sometimes the very fabric of the community is too toxic, too steep in annoying or hate, to salvage through dialogue alone. In some cases, no solution is to expose that rot, let the community rebuild from the ashes.
I understand what you're saying, but I believe that even in those moments, we cannot abandon our commitment to nonviolence and redemption. John Proctor's sacrifice in the Crucible was indeed a stand for truth, but imagine if he had more support, if the community had not been so divided by fear. I believe people can be reached even in the depths of crisis. We just have to keep working at it, not with the tools of destruction, but with the tools of hope.
I couldn't agree more, Dr. King. I think that you and I are after the same thing, truth and justice. It's just that, in the Crucible, we see how quickly community can disintegrate when those values are twisted by fear. The Salem witch trials showed how easily we abandon truth when we feel threatened. People turn on each other and hysteria takes over, you know that? A successful community in the 21st century? Well, it has to learn from that. We've got to foster open dialogue where people aren't afraid to speak up. We need leaders who are driven by reason, instead of fearing the possible consequences of dissent, which should allow herd mentality to create societal collapse.
I love that. It's like we're almost just one more panic away from chaos, right?
Exactly, Sarah. You see it everywhere. Fear is a powerful tool. It can use control people, and when we give into that fear, we start losing our sense of fairness and justice. But as Dr. King said, if we can build a foundation of justice, then we've got a fighting chance.
Dr. King, you've spoken a lot about nonviolence as a philosophy for change. How does that fit into a modern version of community?
Nonviolence, Sarah, is not just a strategy, it's a way of life. It's rooted in the belief that love is stronger than hate, that justice is stronger than injustice. In today's world, where we see conflicts arising everywhere, I would argue that nonviolence is even more relevant. We cannot achieve a just community through violence or coercion. We must engage in peaceful dialogue, as Arthur mentioned, and commit ourselves to resolving conflicts without resorting to harm. Our productive community thrives on empathy and understanding, not fear.
Right. Fear, as we've seen in both contexts, can tear society apart. Whether it's the Red Scare or Salem, when people are driven by fear, reason flies out the window. When a community is built on truth and justice, as you said, there's no need for that kind of scapegoating. People aren't so quick to demonize their neighbors, and that's how community survives. Through courage, reason, and yes.
You know, it sounds like you're both speaking on this idea of interconnectedness, how none of us can really succeed unless we're all given a chance to thrive. Dr. King, you've often spoken about the beloved community. Can you explain on that a little bit more?
Absolutely, Sarah. The beloved community is not just some utopian fantasy. It's a real, achievable goal where we understand that we are all tied together in what I've called a single garment of destiny. In such a community, justice flows like a mighty river, and love and empathy bind people together. But it's not just something that happens naturally. We have to work for it. We have to commit to it. And that means addressing not only racial injustice, but also economic disparities, healthcare access, and even environmental sustainability. A community that neglects its poor or its planet cannot thrive.
What strikes me about that vision, Dr. King, is the idea of moral leadership. You can't just hope for things to work out. When people who have the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. That's what John Proctor did in my book, The Crucible. In the end, it cost him his life. But his stand was essential. He chose truth over safety. It's the kind of leadership that moves communities forward.
That's such a powerful reminder. Leadership, whether in the form of a single individual or a collective action, really does shape the community. You know, when I think about the Puritans, which I write about a lot, there is a sense of communal responsibility that may have been strict, but they were deeply invested in each other's well-being. They believed in education, civic participation, and in their own way, like a kind of interconnectedness, too. Though their inclusivity had some, well, limits.
And isn't that the constant struggle, Sarah? Inclusivity. Making sure that our communities don't just serve the powerful loudest voices, but everyone. That's what a productive community is.
Absolutely. A truly successful community is one that not only talks about inclusivity, but lives it out in practice. It ensures that no one is left behind, that every person, regardless of their background, race, or economic status, has a seat at the table.
You know, hearing both of you talk about justice, empathy, and integrity, it makes me wonder how we can keep up these values front and center, especially when our world is so fast-paced and divided. How do we keep our communities grounded?
I think it's about accountability. We've got to hold each other and make our leaders accountable. People aren't being fair, they're using fear as a weapon. We've got to call it out. And we need to stay vigilant because history, as I've shown in my plays, has repeated itself.
I agree, and I would add that we need to remain hopeful. Even in the face of division, hope is a powerful force. It allows us to see beyond the immediate challenges and continue striving for a more just and loving community. Hope and action, those are the keys to sustaining the values we cherish.
Hope and action. I like that. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Dr. King, Arthur, thank you both for such an enlightening and, dare I say, hopeful conversation. This has been one of those rare moments where history, justice, and human heart come together. I am Sarah Val, and this has been the path to a thriving 21st century community. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Sarah.
It has been a pleasure. Until next time, everyone, let's keep building those beloved communities.